There is a plant growing in the ditch behind almost every house in this country right now. Most people pull it out and throw it away because it stings their hands. That same plant, left to sit in a bucket of water for 2 weeks, will make your tomatoes grow taller than your fence, your cucumbers fatter than your fist, and your cabbage heads so heavy you will need both hands to carry them into the kitchen. It costs nothing. It grows in every yard, every field edge, every neglected corner of every garden in America. And the fertilizer companies would very much like you to keep pulling it out and throwing it in the trash. My name is Martin Hofer. I am Bavarian. I grew up on a small farm in the foothills south of Munich, and my grandmother Rosina fed 8 people out of a garden the size of a modest backyard, with no tractor, no delivery truck, and not one bag of store-bought fertilizer in 50 years of growing food. I'm going to show you exactly what she did, in the order she did it, with what it costs, which is almost nothing. And I'm going to tell you why the garden centers in your town sell you little blue bottles of chemical feed for $15, $20, $30 a bottle when the real thing has been growing wild along your own fence line the whole time. Stay with me. Let me start with what most people get wrong, because if you do not understand this part, nothing else I tell you will make sense. A plant does not need you to feed it directly. That is the first mistake almost every gardener makes. You do not feed the tomato. You feed the soil, and the soil feeds the tomato. Store-bought fertilizer skips that whole conversation. It dumps a shot of nitrogen and phosphorus straight into the ground. The plant drinks it fast, grows fast for a week or 2, and then the ground is just as empty as before, so you buy the bottle again next month. That is the business. A hungry plant is a repeat customer. My grandmother's garden worked a different way, and it worked because of one plant that grows for free everywhere in the world. The stinging nettle. I know how that sounds. You have probably spent your whole life treating nettles as a nuisance, something you cut down and burn so the children do not brush against it. But the nettle is one of the most mineral-rich plants that grows in this climate. It pulls nitrogen out of the soil and holds onto it the way almost nothing else does. It is loaded with potassium, with iron, with silica, with trace minerals that a tomato plant or pepper plant needs to build strong stems and heavy fruit. Farmers in the old country have known this for hundreds of years. My grandmother called it the poor man's fertilizer because it cost a poor family nothing, and a poor family was exactly what most families were. What she made from it we called nettle water. In German it has a longer name, Brennnesseljauch, but I never bothered with the long word either, the same way I never bother with the fancy Latin names for anything growing in a garden. Nettle water is what I will call it, and once you understand what it is, you will never look at that patch of weeds behind your shed the same way again. Here is what it is and why it works, because this is not folklore. This is real chemistry that any agricultural extension office will confirm if you ask them. When you cut nettles and let them sit submerged in water for a week or 2, 2 things happen at once. First, the plant material breaks down and releases its nitrogen, its potassium, and its minerals directly into the water. You are pulling the nutrients out of the leaf and putting them into a liquid a plant's roots can drink immediately. Second, and this is the part almost nobody explains to you, the fermentation process that happens in that bucket builds a population of beneficial microbes in the water. Those microbes go into your soil along with the nutrients when you water your plants with it, and those microbes are the same kind of living helpers that a healthy compost pile builds over months. You are making, in 2 weeks, in a plastic bucket, what would otherwise take a whole season to build in your soil naturally. That is why my grandmother's garden never slowed down. She was not just feeding her vegetables. She was feeding the soil itself, and living soil feeds a plant far better than any bag of granules ever will. Now, let me show you exactly how to make it, because the process matters, and if you skip a step, you will get a bucket of stinking mush instead of a proper fertilizer. You need 3 things: a container, a 5-gallon bucket works fine, or an old plastic barrel if you have a bigger garden. A good armful of fresh nettles, cut before they go to seed, which for most of the country means late spring through midsummer. And water, rainwater if you have it, tap water if you do not. You cut your nettles with gloves because they will sting you if you are careless, and you chop them roughly with a pair of shears or a machete, just rough pieces, nothing fancy. You do not need to be gentle with this plant. The rougher you cut it, the faster it breaks down. You pack the cut nettles into your bucket, filling it about 2/3 full of plant material, loosely packed, not jammed down tight. Then you cover it completely with water, leaving a few inches of space at the top because it is going to bubble as it ferments. Here is the part that surprises people. You do not put a tight lid on it. You cover it loosely, a piece of wood, an old screen, something that keeps the rain and the leaves out, but lets air move in and out. A sealed bucket will go sour in a way that does you no good. A loosely covered bucket ferments the way it is supposed to. Every day you take a stick and you stir it. Once a day is enough. This brings air down into the mixture and keeps the fermentation working the right way instead of turning into a rotten mess. Now, I have to be honest with you about the smell because I will not pretend otherwise. This process smells strong. It smells like a wet compost pile, sharp and a little sour. This is why my grandmother always kept her nettle bucket at the far end of the garden, away from the kitchen window, away from where the family sat for supper. Put yours somewhere out of the way, too. Behind the shed, along the back fence, somewhere the wind carries the smell away from your porch and not toward it. After 10 to 14 days, the mixture will have turned a dark, brownish color, and it will have stopped foaming much when you stir it. That tells you it is ready. You strain out the plant material with an old colander or a piece of burlap, and what is left is a dark, strong liquid concentrate. That plant material you strained out is not waste, by the way. Toss it straight onto your compost pile or dig it into an empty bed. It has already given up most of its nutrients to the water, but it still has value left in it as organic matter. Now, the concentrate itself is too strong to pour straight onto your plants. This is the step people rush, and it is the step that matters most. You dilute it, 1 part nettle water to 10 parts plain water. Pour it into a watering can, mix it well, and water it directly onto the soil around the base of your plants, never onto the leaves, because at this strength it can mark the foliage. You do this once every 2 weeks through the growing season, more often for heavy feeders like tomatoes, squash, and cabbage, less often for things that do not need as much nitrogen, like beans and peas, which make their own. The difference shows up faster than you would think. Within 10 days of the first feeding, you will see it in the color of the leaves, a deeper green than before, and in the speed of new growth. By the time your tomatoes are setting fruit, the plants fed on nettle water will be noticeably heavier and thicker than the same variety fed nothing at all. Now, my grandmother did not stop with just the nettle water. She had a second trick that went alongside it, and I want to share this one too, because it solved a problem that troubles almost every home gardener growing tomatoes and peppers. She saved every eggshell that came out of her kitchen. She rinsed them, let them dry on the windowsill, and once a week she crushed a handful and dropped them into a jar of water, letting them sit for several days. That water she poured around the base of her tomato plants. Eggshells are almost pure calcium carbonate, and calcium is exactly what a tomato plant needs to prevent blossom end rot, that ugly black patch that ruins the bottom of a tomato just as it starts to ripen. Garden centers sell little bottles of calcium spray for this exact problem, $12, $15 a bottle, and it does the same basic job as a jar of eggshells soaking in water on your windowsill for free. Between the nettle water, feeding the nitrogen and the potassium, and the eggshell water feeding the calcium, my grandmother's garden had everything a vegetable plant actually needs, built from what most people consider trash. Weeds from the ditch and shells from the trash can. Let me be honest with you about the limits too, because I will not oversell this to you the way the garden centers oversell their bottles. Nettle water is a nitrogen and mineral feed. It is not a complete substitute for good soil preparation. You still want to work compost into your beds before you plant. You still want to rotate your crops. You still want to mulch to hold moisture. This is not magic. It is one strong tool in a system, the same way it was one tool in my grandmother's system, alongside a compost pile, alongside crop rotation, alongside the manure from whatever animals a family kept. And it does need a little patience. The first batch takes 2 weeks to ferment before it is ready. You cannot rush that. If you pour it on too early, you have mostly just watered your plants with nettle-flavored water and gotten little benefit from it. Give it the full 2 weeks. Now, I want to take a moment, because this is the part that matters most. Think about what a family spends on their garden every summer if they are buying from the store. A bag of granular fertilizer runs $10 to $15 and lasts maybe 6 weeks on a modest vegetable patch. A bottle of liquid tomato feed runs another $15 to $20. A bottle of calcium spray for blossom and rot, another $12 to $15. Over one growing season, a family with a real vegetable garden can easily spend $80 to $100 just on feeding their plants, and every dollar of that goes to a company that has every reason to want you buying the same bottle again next year. The nettle growing along your fence costs you nothing. The eggshells in your trash can cost you nothing. The only thing this method asks of you is a bucket, a little patience, and the willingness to touch a plant most people spend their whole lives avoiding. That is exactly why you have never been told about it. There is no company that can put a barcode on the weeds growing behind your shed. Nobody can build a business selling you something that grows for free in every yard in the country. So the knowledge quietly disappeared from most households, not because it stopped working, but because nobody had a reason to advertise it. My grandmother did not know she was doing anything unusual. She just knew what fed a plant and what did not, because she had no bottle to reach for and no money to spend on one even if she wanted to. So here's what I want you to do this week. Find a patch of nettles. Most of you have some growing somewhere close by, whether you have noticed it or not. Cut an armful with gloves on. Fill a bucket 2/3 full. Cover it with water and set it somewhere out of the way. Stir it once a day. In 2 weeks, you will have your first batch of the same fertilizer that fed my grandmother's garden for 50 years, and it will not have cost you a single dollar. While that bucket is working, start saving your eggshells too. Rinse them, dry them, crush a handful into a jar of water once a week, and give your tomatoes what they actually need before the blossom and rot ever has a chance to start. Tell me in the comments where you live and whether you have nettles growing near you already. I read every one of these, and I want to hear how your garden responds once you start feeding it this way. Next time, I am going to show you what my grandfather did to keep the soil itself alive through the winter, without a single bag of anything from the store, using nothing but fallen leaves, a pitchfork, and a method that has been feeding gardens in the alpine foothills for longer than anyone alive can remember. Until then, cut your nettles, fill your bucket, and remember, the people who worked this land with their hands knew things we are only just starting to remember.